They said Emily was lucky to have a mother-in-law like Miss Grace. Years later, the same people stood in silence as police uncovered a secret buried beneath the family compound. What happened between those two women became a story the village would never forget. Hello, my wonderful family, and welcome back to Imi's African Folktale Stories. Ibanda village was a place where old ways and modern life lived side by side. In the morning, women still swept their compounds with long grass brooms. In the afternoon, young people sat under mango trees scrolling through their phones, posting pictures, and talking about business ideas. Motorcycles roared along dusty roads. Small shops played loud music from cheap speakers. At night, the village glowed with a mix of kerosene lamps, solar lights, and the blue shine of television screens. It was in the nearby town that Emily first met David. Emily was 26 years old, smart, beautiful, and full of dreams. She worked as an administrative officer at the district office. Every day she wore neat dresses, carried files, answered calls, and handled people who often underestimated her because she was young and a woman. But Emily was not weak. She had fought hard to get her job. She wanted more than survival. She wanted success. She wanted to lift her family out of poverty and build a life that would make her mother proud. David was not like the loud men Emily had met before. He was calm. He spoke with respect. He listened before he answered. He owned a small agricultural supply business that sold fertilizers, seeds, and modern farming tools to local farmers. He was educated, steady, and kind in a way that felt rare. They met during a community development workshop organized by the district office. The hall was full. Chairs were packed close together. Local leaders sat in front. Young professionals filled the middle rows. Business owners, farmers, and government workers all came to hear ideas about development in rural areas. When it was Emily's turn to speak, she stood up with confidence. She talked about clean water, better roads, and how women in villages needed more support to start small businesses. Her voice was clear. Her ideas were sharp. Some people nodded. Some looked surprised. A few men even smiled in a way that said they did not expect such bold words from her. David did not smile like that. He watched her carefully. He listened like every word mattered. After the meeting ended, he walked up to her while people were leaving. "Your ideas were powerful," he said. Emily gave a small smile. "Thank you. Most people think young women should stay quiet in meetings." David shook his head. "Then most people are wrong." That simple answer stayed in Emily's mind. It was the beginning of something real. They began talking often. At first it was short calls and messages. Then it became long conversations after work. They met for tea, then coffee, then dinner. David asked about her dreams. Emily asked about his business. He admired her strength. She admired his peace. He never mocked her ambition. He never told her to slow down. Instead, he told her to keep going. Months passed. Their bond grew deeper. Soon they were inseparable. When David finally proposed, he did it in a quiet but beautiful way, under the soft evening light outside a small restaurant in town. He held her hand and told her he wanted a life with her, not just a marriage, but a partnership. Emily said yes with tears in her eyes. Their wedding became one of the biggest celebrations Ibanda village had seen in years. People came from nearby districts. Cars lined the road. Music played from morning until late at night. Women wore bright dresses. Men danced with raised shoulders and proud smiles. Plates of food moved from hand to hand. Children ran around laughing. The air smelled of roasted meat, perfume, dust, and joy. Everyone seemed happy. Almost everyone. As Emily moved from table to table greeting guests, several married women pulled her aside one by one. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes carried something else. One elderly woman held Emily's hand and said softly, "My daughter, enjoy this happiness while it lasts." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman looked toward the house and lowered her voice. "You are about to live with your mother-in-law." Another woman stepped closer and gave a dry laugh. "That is when the real marriage begins." The women laughed together, but their laughter was not kind. It was the laughter of people who had seen pain before and expected it again. Emily forced a smile, but their words entered her heart like a thorn. She had heard stories all her life. Stories of mothers-in-law who controlled everything. Stories of women who were insulted, overworked, and treated like strangers in their own homes. Stories of marriages that looked beautiful from outside but were full of war inside. Those warnings followed Emily even after the wedding ended. So when she finally moved into David's family home, she prepared herself for battle. But the battle never came. David's mother, Miss Grace, welcomed her at the gate with open arms. Miss Grace was a retired nurse, respected by almost everyone in Ebanda village. For many years she had worked at the health center, delivering babies in the middle of the night, dressing wounds, giving medicine, and comforting sick children. Even after retirement, people still came to her for advice. They trusted her. They loved her. Her name carried weight in the village. The moment Emily stepped into the compound, Miss Grace hugged her tightly. "My daughter," she said warmly, "you are home." Emily blinked in surprise. There was no cold face. No sharp voice. No hidden insult. Only warmth. Inside the house, Miss Grace had prepared a welcome meal. There was rice, chicken stew, fresh vegetables, and juice. Emily's room had been cleaned carefully. Fresh flowers sat in a glass jar on the bedside table. The bed was neatly made. The curtains were open to let in light and air. Emily stood there quietly, almost ashamed of the fear she had carried. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe not every mother-in-law was cruel. Maybe Miss Grace was one of the good ones. Over the following months, Miss Grace continued to treat Emily with deep kindness. When Emily came home tired from the district office, Miss Grace would already have food ready. When Emily had late meetings, Miss Grace would save her a plate and warm it again without complaint. When Emily caught malaria and could barely lift her head, Miss Grace stayed awake through the night, placing a wet cloth on her forehead, helping her drink medicine, and checking her breathing like a mother watching over a child. When Emily struggled to balance work and house duties, Miss Grace quietly stepped in without making her feel small. When neighbors whispered that Emily was too focused on her career, Miss Grace defended her. "My daughter is building her future," she would say firmly. "There is nothing wrong with that." The village admired them. Women spoke about Emily with envy. "If only my mother-in-law were like Miss Grace," they said. "She is a blessing. She is rare. She is like a mother from heaven." But while everyone else saw love, something dangerous was growing inside Emily. A small seed of suspicion. At first, it was only a feeling. Why is she always helping me? Why does she never get angry? Why does she look at me like that when she gives advice? Why does she defend me so much? The questions seemed harmless at first. Emily pushed them away. But suspicion is like smoke. It enters slowly, then fills the whole room before you notice. Soon Emily began to see danger in every kind act. When Miss Grace offered advice, Emily felt controlled. When Miss Grace helped with chores, Emily felt watched. When Miss Grace praised her, Emily wondered if it was fake. When Miss Grace asked simple questions about her day, Emily felt exposed. Late at night, while David slept peacefully beside her, Emily lay awake staring at the ceiling. Nobody is this good, she thought. Nobody. Her mind kept turning. Maybe Miss Grace was pretending. Maybe she wanted to control the house through kindness. Maybe she was too sweet because she had something to hide. The more Emily thought, the more uneasy she became. And the more uneasy she became, the colder she grew. Little by little, she stopped smiling freely. She stopped sharing her thoughts. She watched Miss Grace closely, waiting for a mistake, a harsh word, a sign that would prove her fears were true. But Miss Grace never gave her one. Instead, she kept loving her. That only made Emily more suspicious. What Emily did not know was that Miss Grace had seen danger long before she did. She had noticed strange calls. She had seen unfamiliar faces near the compound. She had heard whispers from people who came asking questions about David's business and Emily's salary. She had even received one anonymous warning that someone close to the family was not what they seemed. Miss Grace had tried to protect Emily quietly. She had tried to keep her safe without frightening her. But Emily was already trapped inside her own fear. And fear can blind a person faster than darkness. The tragedy had already begun. And soon, the truth would rise from the ground in a way no one in Ibanda village would ever forget. The rain began late that night, first as a soft tapping on the roof, then as a hard, angry storm that shook the whole house. In Ibanda village, the old family home stood dark against the heavy sky. The mango trees outside bent under the wind. The windows rattled. The wick bulb in the sitting room flickered again and again, as if it too was afraid of the night. David was not home. He had traveled to the city for a business meeting and would not return until morning. Only Emily and Miss Grace were in the house. In the kitchen, Miss Grace stood over a small charcoal stove, stirring a pot of hot stew. The smell of onions, tomatoes, and fresh spices filled the room. She had noticed for days that Emily was eating less, sleeping badly, and speaking very little. "My daughter needs strength," Miss Grace whispered to herself, her voice full of care. "Maybe tonight she will eat well and rest." She had even added Emily's favorite vegetables to the meal. But just outside the kitchen door, Emily stood still in the shadows. Her hands were cold. Her chest felt tight. Her mind was full of thoughts she could not stop. Every kind thing Miss Grace did now felt suspicious. Every smile looked too calm. Every gentle word sounded like a warning. She is too perfect, Emily thought, her heart beating faster. No one is this good. No one. For weeks, that thought had been growing inside her like a dark seed. At first, she had admired Miss Grace. Then she had questioned her. Now she feared her. Slowly, Emily stepped into the kitchen. Miss Grace turned and smiled at once, her face soft and warm in the yellow light. "Oh, Emily," she said kindly. "I was just making your favorite meal. Sit down. You must be tired." But Emily did not move. Outside, the rain hit the roof harder. Thunder rolled across the village like a drum. Miss Grace noticed the fear in Emily's eyes and lowered her voice. "My daughter, are you all right?" That simple question broke something inside Emily. She did not hear love anymore. She heard control. She heard danger. She heard a trap. And in that confused, frightened moment, Emily made a terrible decision. The next morning, the whole village was shaken. Miss Grace was gone. Her wrapper was still hanging on the back of the chair. Her Bible was left open on the table. The pot of stew had gone cold on the stove. Emily sat in the living room with swollen eyes and trembling hands. She had not slept. She had barely spoken. Her face looked pale, and her lips were dry. When the neighbors came knocking, asking where Miss Grace was, Emily forced herself to stay calm. "She left during the night," Emily said quietly. "She said she wanted to go and pray in the forest for peace." The villagers were shocked, but they believed her. After all, Miss Grace was known to walk alone near the hills sometimes. She prayed there. She said the quiet helped her think. So people began to search. Young men went into the forest. Women called her name near the river. Elders checked the paths leading to the hills. Days passed. Then more days. No one found her. No cloth. No footprints. No sign of where she had gone. Slowly, the search stopped. Life in the village moved on, as life always does. But inside the house, something had changed forever. The silence was not normal silence. It was heavy. Painful. It sat in every corner of the home like a shadow that would not leave. At first, Emily felt a strange relief. No more questions. No more fear. No more perfect kindness that made her feel small and guilty. But that relief did not last. Because the house became cold. Too cold. When Emily fell sick with fever, there was no one to bring her herbs. No one sat beside her bed through the night. No one touched her forehead and called her, "My daughter." When she came home tired from work, there was no warm food waiting. When she struggled with bills and office pressure, there was no wise voice to guide her. When she cried alone in the dark, there was no one to hear her. And slowly, painfully, Emily began to understand. Everything Miss Grace had done for her, she was now trying to do alone. And she was failing. One evening, David returned home earlier than expected. He walked into the compound carrying his bag, tired from the journey. But the moment he entered the house, he stopped. Something felt wrong. The air was too still. The rooms were too quiet. The house, once full of warmth, now felt empty. He looked around, confused. "Where is my mother?" he asked. Emily's body went stiff. She looked at him, then looked away. She went away," she said again, her voice low. David frowned. "Went away where?" Emily swallowed hard. She said she wanted peace in the forest. David stared at her for a long moment. Then his face changed. "She would never leave without telling me," he said slowly. His voice was calm, but there was something sharp inside it now. For the first time, doubt entered the house. And for the first time in many days, fear returned to Emily's heart. Months passed. The village became uneasy. People began to whisper again. At the market, women lowered their voices when Emily passed. At the water point, men exchanged looks. Everyone remembered how suddenly Miss Grace had disappeared. Everyone remembered how strange the house had become. Then one morning, while workers were digging near the old storage shed behind the compound, one of them shouted and jumped back. "Come here. Quickly." The others rushed over. The shovel had struck something hard beneath the soil. The workers cleared the dirt with their hands, their faces turning pale as they uncovered what had been buried. Someone ran to call the police. Soon, the whole village gathered at a distance, standing in silence as officers arrived and began their work. The air felt thick. No one spoke loudly. Even the children were told to keep quiet. Then the investigation began. The police asked questions. They checked the ground. They spoke to neighbors. They listened to workers. They searched the house again. And little by little, the truth began to rise from the earth like a ghost that had waited too long to be seen. A broken bracelet. A piece of cloth. A witness who remembered hearing a cry that night. Another who saw Emily near the shed before dawn. Another who noticed fresh soil where there should have been none. Piece by piece, the story came together. And every piece pointed to one person. Emily. David stood frozen when he heard it. His face went pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "No, not her," he whispered at last. But deep inside, he already knew something had changed in Emily long before that night. The kindness she once saw in Miss Grace had slowly turned into fear. And fear had turned into something far more dangerous. The day the truth was fully revealed became the darkest day Ibanda village had ever seen. Miss Grace's remains were found. The village cried openly. Women covered their faces with their wrappers. Old men shook their heads in sorrow. Children were kept indoors. People who had once envied Emily now avoided her completely. No one wanted to stand near her. No one wanted to speak her name. David did not speak for a long time. He sat alone in the sitting room, holding his mother's photograph in both hands. His eyes were red, but no tears came. It was as if his heart had gone numb from pain. Emily did not run when the police came. She did not fight. She did not shout. She only sat there and cried like a broken child. I thought she was controlling me, she said in a shaking voice. I thought she was too good to be real. Her shoulders shook as she spoke. But she was the only person who truly loved me. The words came out like a wound opening. But by then, it was too late. The funeral was small, but the pain was huge. The whole village came. People stood under umbrellas as the rain fell softly over the graveyard. The sky was grey, and the ground was wet and dark. One by one, people spoke about Miss Grace. They remembered how she had delivered babies in the middle of the night. They remembered how she had given medicine to poor families without asking for money. They remembered how she had sat with sick children until they slept. They remembered how she had defended Emily when others mocked her for working too hard. Every story made the grief deeper. Every memory felt like a knife in Emily's heart. At the graveside, Emily could no longer hold herself together. She fell to her knees in the mud. I am sorry, she cried. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Her voice broke completely. I was afraid of the one person who loved me most. But the grave stayed silent. It gave no answer. It never would. David stood behind her, silent and shattered. He was not angry anymore. He was beyond anger. He was only sad. Deeply, painfully sad. Because in one terrible moment, he had lost both his mother and the wife he thought he knew. Years later, Ibanda village still remembers the story. But now, the elders tell it differently. They do not tell it only as a tragedy. They tell it as a warning. They tell it to young girls preparing for marriage. They say, do not judge every mother-in-law by the bad stories you hear. Yes, some mothers-in-law are harsh. Yes, some are jealous. Yes, some make life difficult. But not all of them are bad. Some are kind. Some are gentle. Some are loving. Some will treat you like their own daughter. Some will stand beside you when your own strength is gone. Some will cook for you, pray for you, defend you, and carry your pain as if it were their own. So to every girl who is about to marry, listen carefully. Do not enter a home with hatred in your heart. Do not expect war before you have seen peace. Do not let fear blind you to love. Give respect. Give patience. Give time. Because sometimes, the woman you fear most may be the one protecting you most. And if you are lucky enough to meet a mother-in-law like Miss Grace, treasure her. Love her. Learn from her. Because a good mother-in-law is not a curse. She is a blessing. And in a Banda village, that lesson was learned too late.
Share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Bye. Until next time, remember, every family has secrets, but love, truth, and forgiveness can open doors that pain has kept closed for years. Take care, stay blessed, and I'll see you in the next story.